Good morning, everybody. I am Pavanjot Kaur, your moderator for today's session. We cannot be more proud than to be amidst such great people. I feel privileged to welcome Sir R. Santana Krishnan and Mr. Sanpreet Singh Ajmani, President, Youth Bar Association of India. Sir R. Santana Krishnan, who is endowed with boundless achievements and versatility, has gained a permanent place on the legal map. I welcome you all to the third session of the summer school, topic being understanding the conflict and the concept of mediation. R. Santanan Sir was born in a middle-class family in 1953 at Hyderabad and pursued his school and college education between the years 1958 and 1976. He obtained a master's degree in economics from Osmania University, Hyderabad. During the student days, he organized youth festivals and sports events, and as a student organizer, found and headed Youth Folks League, a literary club at Hyderabad. He also organized educational tours and trekking expeditions, subsequently espousing the cause of rule of law as part of Organization for Protection of Democratic Rights during the years 1975 to 79. He was briefly employed with the provincial government during 1981 to 87 and was also secretary to Employees Welfare Association. During the course of employment, was involved in the work the Election Commission of India from voter enumeration onwards till the completion of poll process and as an official was part of the democratic process of conduct for general elections. While in employment, graduated in law. He joined the profession of law during the beginning of 1988 and after practicing in the High Court of Hyderabad for a few years, shifted to the Supreme Court of India at Delhi in 1992. Was standing counsel of Road Transport Corporation for more than a decade. Practiced mainly in employment and administrative law, and also in human rights, elections, arbitration, and constitutional law. As an active member of the bar associations, assisted in their activity of continuing legal education and organization of cricket among lawyers. After being elected as president of Indian Advocates Cricket Association in 2002, started associating with CLA. He was co-opted as council member at large of Commonwealth Lawyers Association in 2008 as deputy head of the local organizing committee, organized the 17th Commonwealth Law Conference at Hyderabad as part of 4th LCWC, hosted a sports law conference in Delhi under the aegis of CLA, elected as vice president of Commonwealth Lawyers Association for term 2015-17 and subsequently its president for the term 2017-19. Now I would request you, sir, to kindly highlight the topic for today, understanding the conflict and concept of mediation.
Thank you, Paramjit Kaur. Good morning, all of you, including our friends Sanpreet Singh and Rahul. Understanding the conflict and the concept of mediation is a topic on which we will be deliberating in the coming, say, about 30 plus minutes. When we say conflict, what do we mean? Do we try to understand it in Hindi? Can we say jagada? So it has got various connotations, and in various ways the word is used to understand the disagreement or the escalated disagreement between, say, two individuals or two groups of persons, between communities, between different regions, between the countries, etc., and the world at large. Conflict can also be within one's own self. You think of something in the morning and you think you are right. By the time sun sets, your thinking changes and you might say, whatever I thought in the morning was not correct. So that also can be a conflict. But to broadly understand, how do you define conflict? I was what you call it, searching for an appropriate definition. The one which I got, which is nearer to what we exactly want, serves the purpose, and I what do you call it, read out the uh, definition. It says individuals or groups wishing to carry out mutually inconsistent acts concerning their wants, needs, or obligations. This could lead to, say, disagreement, and if the disagreement escalates, it leads to conflict. It can be, as I said, a fight, a quarrel, a battle, a strife, and you can go on. But if we have to understand what is the basis or what leads to conflict, there can be many ways in which we can look at this scene called conflict. Say, for example, superiority. If you feel that you are superior within the family or within your own community, you have the tendency of trying to tell everybody this is correct. Some may disagree with you. And if they disagree with you and start arguing, that can lead into a conflict. So the superiority can come from, say, within the family, within the community. Maybe as a teacher, you feel that you are superior. It can be, say, because of the fact that you come from a particular cultural background and you feel that you are morally sound, so you can tell the world what is correct and what is not correct. Not necessarily everybody would agree with you. And if there is disagreement, that can lead to conflict. Injustice. What we come across in our day-to-day life is there are a number of persons, individuals, set of people, communities, etc., who always perceive some kind of injustice that has been done to them. It can be anything. It can be with regard to a particular statement you make, or it can be with regard to, say, your position in the society, or it can be relatable to your color, etc., or the caste in which you are born. So you always have the tendency to think there is some kind of injustice that is done to me. That can also lead to conflict. Then we can also think of, say, distrust. If there is distrust between two individuals, say they may be neighbors, they may be, what do you call it, in a class, may not be your friend, but sits at a distance, but there is some kind of a dislike between each other because of the fact one does not trust the other. At some point in time, this also can lead to conflict. As individuals and as communities, one can be vulnerable. Vulnerable because of your conviction to certain things which the majority might not agree. So in that case also, there is some kind of a conflict that may arise. Then we can also think in terms of helplessness. You might feel that you do not have the requisite ability to, say, attain a certain thing. It can be, say, passing a competitive examination, it can be writing your own annual examination or anything of that sort. So this kind of thinking can also lead to conflict. But don't you think whatever I'm telling you so far seems to be a bit vague? probably we are shooting in the air, not trying or not able to do, not able to think what is exactly you are trying to say. So all these things will be helpful if we take or demonstrate, say, by way of illustration. Let me start with a small family unit. In a home, you have father, mother, son, and daughter. Assuming for a while, in your relatives who are nearer to you, maybe father's, brothers, or sisters' family, or your mother's, brothers, or sisters' family, there is no male child at all. And in your family, there is a son and there is a daughter. So what happens is in that kind of a scenario, there is a possibility of what you call it, one start getting a feeling that the daughter might feel the son is given a special treatment, and because of the feeling that you develop that the son is getting a special treatment, that may lead to a conflict. As parents, mother and father might not be discriminating against the daughter, but the fact that in the family there is only one son from the nearby relatives and what do you call it, or distant relatives, if you attach a special importance to your son without meaning anything, that may also lead to conflict. Within the same family, what you can also think of is, supposing the male child, if the father who belongs to the yesteryears, understandably, thinks in terms of parting with his property to the son and not to the daughter. And let us assume for a while the daughter is doing law and one among you might be there. Understandably, the daughter will get agitated and will raise an issue within the family and try to tell, legally, I have this much of right in the property. So this can also be leading slowly to a conflict. In this way, you can visualize so many things that can happen within the family, which can lead to a conflict. Let us take an illustration of you're in a particular community or in a particular locality in a city or in a small town. There is always problems between yourself and your neighboring family. Assuming for a while, the neighbor is now planned to construct a wall in between your two houses. The fact that the neighbor is trying to construct a wall, the fact that the neighbor has done everything correct to construct the wall at the appropriate place by getting due permissions from the authorities, but still the fact that you have developed some kind of animosity towards your neighbor can also lead to your thinking that I can't believe this man. Let me check whether he has done it correct. You may still go and raise an issue that you have not done it correctly. But all this arises out of your perception and you're developing some kind of animosity against your neighbor. So similarly, if you are in a particular village which is, say, nearer to the highway, and beyond your village, about say 2 kilometers or 3 kilometers from your village inside, interior, there's another village where the government plans and thinks of making the entire village, say, electrified. In the sense, they have decided to get on with the project where the entire village will get electricity. You belonging to a particular village called A can get agitated. It is so easy to come to my village and provide this facility. Instead of that, you are going beyond my village and going to an interior village and setting up a project whereby the entire village will be get electricity. This can also give rise to conflict between these two villages. You might start fighting, you might end up in some forum, either with the panchayat authority or the municipal authority or the municipal corporation, depending on where you're located. Similarly, you can also think in terms of, say, dispute between, say, two provinces, two states. What is the dispute that you can visualize? The dispute which can visualize is, say, a river originates in a particular state and passes through your state and then ultimately joins the ocean. This particular fact that the river originates in a state and passes through your state can also lead to a conflict. And in India, we have got a number of states entangled in a dispute because of the issues that raised by the state where the river originates, saying that the river originates in my state, so I have a better right over you. This can also lead to a conflict, and we see a number of tribunals established across the country to resolve these kind of disputes. Similarly, there can be, say, a conflict between two countries. Currently, we are witnessing what is happening between India and China. So I'll have to think in terms of going to Galwan Valley, where the perception is there is something called LAC and not LOC. So when I say it is LAC, which means it is line of actual control. Line of actual control is a perception. The line of control means there is a clear demarcation between the two countries and you know where the line is drawn. But when it comes to the actual line of control, one never knows. What was the position between before 1962, how the position changed in 1962, and what it came to be known in 1993, and what you perceive in 2020 changes from time to time. So with the result, there is a conflict, and you all know that we are witness to loss of 20 precious lives of the Indian Jawans in their conflict with the Chinese. Going beyond the dispute between the countries, if you go a little back in history, we all are witnesses to the fact that the number of Western European countries post-industrial revolution started colonizing the world. If you can recall, the English and the French were fighting in India for supremacy. The British won, the French lost, and that's how we became a British colony. This kind of a fight was going across the universe, and ultimately the disputes that arose led to the biggest historical conflict which we ever saw, which was the World Wars I and World Wars II. In this two world wars, you can understandably see the human loss, human life loss, and the world became different post the Second World War. Because of these two world wars, which gave rise to creation of institutions like the United Nations. We also saw so many such institutions being created after the Second World War. And one such institution which can be important for us to understand is the International Court of Justice. So, International Court of Justice also came into being to resolve disputes between two countries. So, as I started giving you illustration from a small unit of a family where father, mother, son, and daughter are there, and how you can visualize the conflict. And from there, we have ended up witnessing what happened during the world wars and the subsequent creation of United Nations and various such institutions, which could either, what I call it, try to make peace, or if there is a conflict, try to resolve the conflict by way of, say, adjudication. When you come back to India, post 1947, when India attained independence, all of us saw the stalwarts who were part of the freedom movement sat together in a setup called Constituent Assembly, and to frame the Constitution of India, which came into being in 1950. If you carefully go through this document, what you will find is certain provisions are made to ensure or to avoid certain conflicts. Say, for example, since time immemorial, certain sections of our society were deprived. They were not part of the mainstream. So in order to bring them part of the mainstream, the constitution makers provided a reservation to the deprived social classes. Similarly, you can also find mechanisms where if there is a dispute at any level, from the micro level to the macro level, they have provided mechanisms through which the conflicts can be settled. So when I started speaking to you, when I started sharing my thoughts with regard to what exactly is the conflict, I slowly forayed into the field of how to think in terms of resolving conflict from the micro level, say, to the macro level. This is as far as the constitutional framework is concerned. But if you see in a larger perspective, in a historical perspective, how conflicts came to be resolved over hundreds and thousands of years back. Initially, it was a society which was primitive in nature. Since the society was primitive in nature, might was the right. Conflict resolution was possible by using your muscle power. Slowly and steadily, as civilization advanced, when we started seeing some kind of what you call it, order in the society, where the king started ruling, what we got to see is the king himself at various levels acting as an adjudicator, trying to settle disputes at a particular level. But at the same time, in a village level, what happens? We saw something called panchayats. Panchayats need not be a mediation. Panchayat can be a combination of so many things. And panchayat was a mechanism at the village level to deal with the conflict and try to settle the dispute between, say, warring individuals or warring families, etc., etc. Panchayat, when you say punch, punch means five. Five persons who are elders in the village used to sit, adjudicate, and settle the dispute. And India, over hundreds of years, accepted this as a dispute resolving mechanism. When I'm passing through the, say, king's rule, where the way in which the disputes were sought to be settled at various levels, I am also reminded of what happened during the time when Akbar, a Mughal emperor called Akbar, was ruling most part of India. You must have heard this name called Tulsidas. Anybody who has got some kind of a connection to Hindi poetry will know who Tulsidas was. What happened? There was a minister in Akbar's cabinet by name Raja Todarmal. There was a dispute among his own relatives. This dispute was with regard to the property, etc., etc., in Kashi. Because of the requisition that came, Tulsidas came to be appointed as an arbitrator. You can see it on the screen. This is from the museum of the Allahabad High Court, which has recorded this particular settlement through mediation. The word that is used there, the language is slightly different, so it will be difficult for us to read and understand. But by and large, Tulsidas is called Madhyastha. When we say Madhyastha, we are almost there in terms of, say, trying to understand, it must be something like a mediation. Mediation is a modern concept, but about 400 to 500 years back, probably in the 16th century, this particular dispute was settled by none other than the famous poet called Tulsidas. So this is one interesting anecdote for us to understand as to how the dispute resolution mechanism was prevalent during the time when Akbar was ruling this country. A little later on, we also saw the British administration taking over from the East India Company and setting up various forums through which, say, disputes started being resolved. They created a set of rules. You call it evidence, you call it procedural laws in both in terms of civil and criminal. Basing on these rules, the adjudicatory mechanism was established through which people used to take recourse to these institutions in the disputes that arose among the community. But as we normally get to hear this word called rule of law, instead of few individuals sitting and trying to resolve a dispute, here they brought in the adjudication mechanism in terms of, say, rule-based. Evidence, procedures, all these things came into being during the course of their rule, and those rules were the basis on which the disputes were adjudicated. In the process, what happens is somebody sits there, somebody hears the parties, somebody cross-examines, somebody examines the documents, and in the result, they gave a judgment. Even today, the same mechanism is followed in our country as it is in world over. So that is what we slowly traveled to see in this process of resolving disputes at the micro level and also at the macro level. But when the docket explosion became the order of the day, people started searching what are the alternatives through which the disputes can be settled. Normally in India, when we think of mediation and settlement through mediation, what we are witness to in various courts, court-attached mediations, what we are witness is dispute between the husband and wife. Through mediation, either settlement or no settlement. But in a country like America, United States of America, something else was more important, which is settlement of disputes which are, say, commercial in nature. A businessman who is investing X amount in a particular project, which gets into dispute, he cannot wait to get the disputes settled through court mechanism, since that takes years. The question is, after 10 years, if the dispute is settled in terms of you have won the case, you might not be so happy. But if the same dispute is settled at the time of the beginning of the dispute, say, if not 10 years, 9 years before, and if you had got part of the amount which you expected, you would have been more happy. So the American system slowly and steadily pushed itself to search in terms of alternative mechanisms towards resolution of disputes. Then came this idea called mediation. When they introduced this mechanism called mediation, the thinkers at various levels ultimately led to creation of dispute resolution mechanism through this mediation. What they hit upon is they created a structure. They created a particular structure through which everybody will go through. And they created a structure in such a manner that a mediator will sit as a neutral party and facilitates the dispute settlement. This mechanism evolved and started being implemented in this society called United States of America around the year, say, 1970s. And slowly and steadily, it started spreading world over. First, it caught the attention of Western Europe, and slowly the advanced, say, countries where the commercial activities were dominating. So slowly and steadily, this particular dispute resolution mechanism as an alternative, when it started catching the attention, it also came into India. When I say it came into India, it came to India only during this century, in the sense beyond 2000. And in the last 20 years, it has developed to a particular level, which gives us satisfaction, because I recently verified what is the position of, say, mediation in countries, or neighboring countries like Pakistan, Sri Lanka, and Bangladesh. What I came to know is they are still at the rudimentary stage. Mediation has caught the imagination of India, and today we are not just confined to resolving dispute which are family disputes in nature, say between husband and wife. We have traveled beyond that and started also adjudication disputes which can be civil in nature or which can be commercial in nature. But before going further, we must also try and understand, how do you define mediation? I thought I was searching for a good definition, and I settled at one definition which I'll read out to you. Mediation. It is a structured, voluntary, interactive negotiation process where a neutral person, who is called a mediator, uses his or her specialized communication and negotiating techniques for a settlement of dispute. But the most important aspect of mediation is it is a party-centered process as opposed to, say, adjudication, where the focus is on the interest of the party, the need of the party, and also the rights of the parties. If we have to understand it better, I must tell you, in adjudication, what happens, as we discussed earlier, there the judge conducts the trial in a lower court. It can be civil or criminal, and we are concerned with the civil trial. And through the mechanism of, say, producing evidence, examination and cross-examination of witnesses, hearing the arguments, and ultimately the judge hands over the judgment after hearing everybody to the satisfaction of one and all. In that scenario, what happens is the judgment either goes in favor of one party and against the other. When it comes to mediation, when I was reading out the definition, it is party-centric. When I say party-centric, this is nothing but creation of a mechanism, creation of a process of dispute settlement where the parties are pushed, are coaxed to come forward and settle their dispute. And what is the role of a mediator? The mediator plays an extraordinary role of a, what I call it, neutral party. He only facilitates the parties to settle their disputes. What he does is he creates an atmosphere where the parties who are involved in the dispute come forward and try to settle their dispute. The mediator does not suggest any solution. The mediator does not speak in terms of as to what is right and what is wrong. The mediator does not express any opinion, but he only facilitates where the parties come forward because it is their problem, it is their dispute. This man creates confidence among them and then drives them towards dispute resolution. And that's how the mediation as an alternative mode has, what you call it, started gaining importance over a period of time. As I was telling you earlier, people started realizing, if I win this case in a court, through a court of law, say after 15 years, whatever the benefit I might get, I will be better off if the dispute is settled at the beginning. In the sense, if the dispute is settled at the beginning, I might not get the same thing which I would get after 15 years in adjudication. I might get a little less, but I'll be more happy because all the investments that are made in business are what you call it according to certain time. The kind of time I save, say 14 years, 15 years, more than 10 years, and then go ahead with my business will make a business sense. And that's the reason why slowly and steadily mediation as an adjudicatory process, I mean, as a dispute mechanism settlement process is slowly and steadily gaining importance. Having said this, I must also, what I call it, try to tell you as to what is the position with regard to mediation in India. Although mediation as a mechanism of dispute resolution has gained importance, and as the days are passing on, every day the importance is growing and not what we call it, lesson. Normally, when we speak of mediation, what comes to our mind is there is a mediation board which is attached to every court. And only when the court refers a particular matter to the mediation, the mediators in that particular court will sit to resolve the dispute. No, we have traveled beyond that. The mediations can arise out of a contract, and at a private level also, people started spreading a word and settling the dispute, say, through mediation. When I am saying this, what is the, say, legal framework we have? I am reminded of a particular act called, say, Industrial Disputes Act. When I was speaking to you about conflict from a micro to the macro level, one important aspect which missed our attention at that time was the dispute that arises between the workers and the management. If a particular company which manufactures, say, fans, and if they have 200 employees, and if there is a dispute between the workers and the management with regard to bonus or with regard to the wage increase, they don't straightaway run to the court. The Industrial Disputes Act provides a mechanism, and which is called conciliation, slightly different from mediation. And through the conciliation mechanism, a labor officer who is called a conciliation officer is appointed. The representative of the workers go there. The representative of the management also go there. And through the process of conciliation, they try to settle the dispute. Only when that conciliation fails, you think in terms of going to an industrial court. So as early as 1947, we already started having a taste of settlement of a dispute, which can be called ADR. Thereafter, we also have an amendment brought in, say, in CPC, Civil Procedure Code. In the year 1999, Section 89, which is an amendment brought to the Civil Procedure Code, brought in a mechanism where any adjudication which got any dispute that goes to the court, whatever be the kind of court for adjudication of a dispute, the court has got power to refer the dispute to ADR. When I say ADR, it can be arbitration, it can be mediation, etc., etc. So they explore the possibility of settling the dispute through this mechanism called ADR. But you can ask a question, don't we have, when you say this is the development in India with regard to the field called mediation, do you have a specific mechanism which deals with which deals with mediation with regard to dispute settlement? There is no act as such today to settle with dispute through what you call it, the mechanism of mediation. As I told you, we have Industrial Disputes Act, we have CPC, and we also have this Arbitration and Conciliation Act, where what we call it, this particular mechanism can be used. Today, I must tell you, with all those who are there in the field of trying to increase the importance of mediation, are in the process of getting one statutory enactment, which hopefully we will see in this foreseeable future in the year 2020 itself, hopefully, where mediation will get an elevated status. I must also tell you, when I was referring to, say, the river disputes between two states, where a tribunal is established to resolve the dispute between two states. Interestingly, when there arose a dispute between two states in the northeastern part of India, probably with regard to boundaries. A mediator was appointed, a mediator by name Sriram Panchu, who is the leading light in India with regard to mediation. He will also be addressing you later on this week. He was appointed to adjudicate the dispute between these two states. So that's how, what you call it, mediation has been assuming importance as the days pass on. But before I wind up, I must also share with you what is happening with regard to the development as far as mediation, the world at large. All of you must have been noticed we have something called New York Convention. When I refer to New York Convention, that is with regard to settlement of disputes through arbitration. New York Convention gave a credence where what happens is arbitration proceedings with regard to disputes between parties coming from various countries, because of New York Convention, because of various countries signed the New York Convention, there is a legitimacy that is attached to the award that is passed by the tribunal, arbitration tribunal, and that mechanism provides for implementation of that particular award. Similarly, because of the effort that was made and the initiative that was taken by United Nations, last year in Singapore, in the month of August, we got something similar happen, which is called Singapore Convention, where more than 40 countries got together and signed the Singapore Convention, whereby the mediation through which the disputes that are settled from parties coming from different countries, to give credence to that particular settlement, the Singapore Convention came into being, and India is also a signatory to that particular convention. India was late, but ultimately they reached to sign the convention. So what is important here is, why Singapore? Today, if you recall, if you have to single out one particular jurisdiction in the entire world which has traveled leaps and bounds in terms of settling the disputes through mediation, if you have to single out one country, it is Singapore. And that's the reason why United Nations took the initiative and got this Singapore Convention signed by a number of countries. So such is the importance which is growing as the days pass on, and what you call it, the dispute, what you call it, through the mediation is getting resolved. Broadly speaking, these are the things which I have to share with you. I don't see my friend Jitendra Sharma here. I was trying to tell you that I have to stop here because if I travel little beyond that, I will be encroaching upon his jurisdiction, because he will be speaking to you on various stages of mediation. If I travel little beyond, there will be a conflict, and Mr. Sanpreet has to come and resolve the dispute. So I'm stopping here. So thank you very much for the opportunity, Sanpreet, Rahul, and Pawanjit Kaur. Thank you very much.
Rahul, please mute Pawanjot, moderator. Pawanjot, you may unmute yourself if Okay. Sir is here now. We welcome respected Sir Mr. Jiten Mohan Sharma. He is a senior advocate at Supreme Court of India and mediator. He would be speaking with us on the next topic, that is the stages of mediation. Over to you, Pavanjot. You may now ask the participants to put their queries.
I would like to ask the participants to put up their queries now, the questions and queries they have. And the first question is to be asked by client Clint Kolako.
Clint, you can unmute yourself and ask directly. Okay, Pavan, you may put his question.
Okay. So the question is, if there is any dispute between the countries at the international level with regards to the territorial boundaries, and one country demands the dispute to be settled to referendum at the United Nations, take an example of our motherland, India, and neighboring Pakistan, and other dispute between India and China with regards to portion of land of Arunachal Pradesh, which dispute has further engulfed into commercial dispute and banning of products. Can such dispute be settled through mediation rather than going to the International Court of Justice and without the support and assistance of United Nations? If yes, sir, how it will be settled, and at what level the judgment of mediation can be enforced and applied?
To answer in very short, the answer is why not? If you remember, during the course of our dispute, say either with Pakistan or China, you heard the American president saying, I would like to mediate and settle the issue. So this is outside the UN mechanism. So these things are definitely possible, provided the parties have some kind of meeting of minds. Because see, as we discussed, mediation is a voluntary process where all the parties to the dispute should voluntarily come forward and get their dispute settled through mediation. As I told you, it's a voluntary process. If these countries are willing, if a third party or a third country, whoever that person might be, a person or a country might be, can definitely involve and settle the dispute.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Abhishek Kashyap, kindly unmute yourself and you can put up your question.
Mr. Abhijit Kashyap. Okay, moderator, you may ask.
Yeah. So why is there a need for alternative procedures to litigation?
The reason is simple. The reason is docket explosion. Today, there are a number of cases. Let me talk to you about Supreme Court, where I come from. Today, there are disputes which are not yet settled for 10 years and above. The question is, when are they going to see the light of the day? And who are the parties who are alive? That dispute which is there pending in Supreme Court for the past 10 years must have started 20 years back. So, in the process of searching for a better, effective and alternative, say, adjudicatory process, mediation has evolved.
Thank you, sir. Now, Hamdan can put up his question. Kindly unmute yourself and put up the question, please.
Hamdan, can you hear us?
Good afternoon, sir. Thanks for a very informative session. My question is, can a qualified arbitrator be a mediator, or is it essential to have additional qualities to become a mediator? If so, what are those additional qualities that you may recommend? Thank you, sir.
Today, the mediation mechanism is done by persons who are qualified to be a mediator, which means there is a short course which you undergo and get yourself accredited as a mediator, and then you are qualified to sit and mediate the disputes. So this does not mean you cannot be an arbitrator and only a mediator. You can be everything. You can be a lawyer, you can be an arbitrator, and you also can be a mediator.
Thank you, sir.
Naina Verma can put up the question, please.
Good afternoon, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So my question is related to the issue of which is like going in Hong Kong. Like Hong Kong was under some, I think, Britishers, and then they give it to China, and then there was a treaty in which they could not change the law, but they find a loophole in it, and they change the law through that loophole. So if one of the parties find a loophole in the decision which like they came to a treaty, but they find this loophole in it, so what can be done by the other party if another party do so?
See, this is the transfer of power took place in the year 1997, and in that transfer, the agreement between the United Kingdom and the China was for another 50 years from 1997 onwards, they will continue to have the existing system. In the sense, today Hong Kong is called Hong Kong SAR, which means Special Administrative Region, which means it is one country, but two systems are being practiced. When I say two systems, unlike China, Hong Kong has elections. They have an assembly of, say, 70 representatives who get themselves elected, and they decide the course of action for Hong Kong. So that's the basis on which this happens. But you are asking with regard to the loophole. I don't see any loophole. China is deliberately violating the agreement between China and United Kingdom and trying to establish its rule over Hong Kong, which is being resisted now. As far as the dispute part is concerned, everything depends on what the assembly, which is going to be elected right now, because the elections are around the corner there. When they get elected, what is the kind of call they take assumes importance. So depending on that, the dispute, how it has to be adjudicated and resolved, they will have to take a call and decide.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Ayan Khan, please put up your question.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon, Ayan.
Yes. So my question is, in the Singapore Convention that was signed last year, is there a provision that requires countries who have signed the convention to enact laws regarding mediation? So, like New York Convention made countries to make arbitration laws in accordance with what provisions it has. So, does the mediation convention also do this? Or is it the directive for the countries?
It has created a mechanism where any dispute that is settled between the parties coming from different jurisdictions to be given effect to in the respective countries. That's exactly what the Singapore Convention tells. In tune with what the Singapore Convention says, if any country is going to enact a law in mediation, it's welcome. Whenever they enact a law, it should not be contrary to what is there in the Singapore Convention.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Riya Kothari, kindly put up your question, please.
Riya Kothari, can you hear us?
Yes, sir. Am I audible?
Yes.
Good afternoon, sir. Thank you for such an informative session. My question was, sir, could you please elaborate a little on the mediation course you were talking about earlier for a question?
Pardon, just repeat your question.
So actually, I wanted to ask that could you please elaborate on the mediation course you were talking about in the earlier question?
You mean you're asking mediation? Elaborate on what?
Mediator,
Actually, she wants you
mediator
to
course, sir.
enlighten a little on the mediation accreditation and the courses that you were talking about. This is what is the question.
Yes, sir, certainly.
Are you asking the mediation process?
No, sir.
The question is, you talked about the accreditation and other qualifications to be a
Right.
competent mediator. So she's
Right,
asking you to elaborate that what all sort of such
See,
courses are available. What is this accreditation and all?
Yes, I got the question. In order to become an accredited mediator, you need to undergo a course for say about 40 hours, right? It can be 5 hours per day and then spread out in so many days. So once you successfully undergo that course, thereafter you have to sit with a senior mediator who is actually doing the mediation. And if you are successful in about 10 mediations out of the 20 you appear, then you are qualified to get accreditation. So the concerned, committee, for example, in Supreme Court, we have a committee which takes care of mediation training. So they will give you a certificate that you are from today onwards an accredited mediator, and you are eligible to say sit as a mediator.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
Soumya Khanna, kindly put up your question.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
So my question is, could you give an overview over the importance of the conflict triangle of people, process, and the problem with regard to understanding the concept of conflict and mediation?
See, as I started by speaking on conflict, conflict can arise at your own individual self. You might be in conflict with your own self. The way you have a particular thought on a particular issue in the morning, you might change in the evening. So in order to resolve that, you might sit with a person who is well versed in that particular field, educate yourself, and draw a conclusion. Similarly, if there are disputes between two persons, so what happens is there are various ways, various mechanisms through which the disputes can be settled. One such mechanism is mediation.
Thank you, sir. Aryan Mudgal, sir, kindly put up this question.
Hello, hi everyone. Am I audible? Greetings, sirs.
Yes, I can.
Ma'am. So yesterday, like in previous lecture, also we had a talk with Sir Justice Kudin sir, and he said about mediation in criminal cases. So my question is, sir, where do we draw a line in criminal cases? Like I can understand that in a family feud, like examples which he gave, that in a family if it has occurred, they ask for quashing of the whole proceedings. But where in general do we draw a line that these cases can be tackled with mediation and these cases are not for mediation in criminal cases specifically?
In a criminal case, the society as such is involved. And that's the reason why you have a public prosecutor prosecuting the case, and as a defense lawyer, you will be defending a particular person who was alleged to have involved in certain criminal act. But in criminal law, there is also something called plea bargaining. What is plea bargaining? What is the concept of plea bargaining, where disputes can be settled through, say, the mechanism of mediation? And then I would say Mr. KTS Tulsi, who is a leading criminal lawyer in India. He is going to address you on this plea bargaining. So plea bargaining is one such aspect through which the dispute can be settled, where the accused of a particular thing comes forward and pleads guilty, and then thereafter the consequence will follow.
Sir, just another question, sir, which I've seen normally in courts and cases, jo thoda bahut I've seen, that the parties have a deep-seated, tendency to make the other party suffer. So they don't see the benefiting situation out of the case, but they want the other party to suffer through the process. So how, as a mediator, how do we tackle that situation?
See, our friend Mr. Jitendra Sharma would be addressing you on that later in the week. But briefly speaking, for you to understand, once the mediator understands the fact that one party is trying to prolong and tease the other party, the mediator will bring forth and explain the consequence of what exactly is happening. See, if the mediator can understand what is happening, and at some point in time the mediator thinks the mediation cannot proceed any more further, and then says or gives a failed report, the court will understand as to why the matter is not being settled. So what happens is, mediator will have a role of trying to tell the parties, or both the parties equally, as to in what way there is a possibility, and if you are not willing to settle, and if you are trying to prolong it, or if you are trying to tease the other party, anybody would understand, and the mediator will try to convince you on that. If you don't, then the court will take up that.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for all the knowledge, sir. Thank you.
Ms. Deepa Saini can put up a question.
Deepika Sharma.
One is. So one question is, what remedies parties have if they are not satisfied with the mediation?
See, there is no question of not being satisfied with the mediation, because, as I was telling you, mediation is a voluntary process. If both the parties are willing, only then they come forward. And as I was telling you, the mediator does not tell you or drive the parties to settle the issues on A, B, and C in a particular manner. No. The mediator only talks to you in such a manner that you arrive at your own solution. So there is no question of you being not happy with the settlement, because you willingly come forward and of your own volition, you settle this dispute in a particular manner. That will be your choice and not the choice of the mediator.
Thank you, sir. Deepika Sharma can put up a question.
Yes, ma'am. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
If I may ask, can you please share a little bit from your experience as a mediator, especially when it was hard to resolve the dispute between the parties?
When the mediator sees whatever he may do in number of sittings he had with both the parties, if he feels the dispute cannot be settled, come what may, if the parties are not willing to get the dispute settled, the mediator will understand that, and he will just report the mediation failed.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir, for fabulously highlighting the topic for today. And now I would like to call upon Mr. Sanpreet Singh for delivering the word of thanks.
Thank you, Pawan.
Thank you, sir. And
thank you so much, Pawan. It brings end to our third class, and the most wonderful part is that we are having full attendance in these classes, and the topic is very interesting. Participants are very vigilant. They are putting their queries very well, which is being addressed by our speakers. And thank you so much, Santan sir, for giving your valuable insights about the topic. And thank you, Pawan, and all the participants. Thank you so much, Rahul, for organizing this. So this brings to an end to our third class, and for the other classes, you'll get the informations.
Thank you, Sanpreet, for the opportunity. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.
Nice meeting you all students.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
थैंक यू सर.
थैंक यू सर. आप कुछ कहना चाह रहे हैं?
नहीं, बस मैंने कहा थैंक यू सो मच. यू elaborated in such a simple manner, and it was a very difficult topic. In fact, making the you to understand the concept of mediation and a conflict, it is just like it. If you recollect, during law classes, there used to be a paper called jurisprudence. That used to be the toughest paper, because that was a theory of law. You are talking about theory of mediation, and you talked it so simply in simple words. So they understood, the students, even I understood, I got a better perspective. Conflict with his own self. That was good.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
चलिए सर.
Okay.
राहुल, हम बात करते हैं इसके बाद सर. राहुल.
Yes, sir.
अभी आप, मैं और संतान सर बात करते हैं कल के बारे में.
Okay, sir.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so
Thank you.
much.